But we are taking a break. We're taking a break. I'm watching military stuff. You guys love that. Reaction time with TommyKay.
Things are shaking up in Berlin. After years of negligence and underfinancing, German lawmakers pledged to raise defense spending above 2% of the GDP, along with a plan to inject at least 100 billion euros into a special fund for the Bundeswehr. That's a lot of money, and it comes atop
Wait, Austria is not in NATO? Wait. And Ireland? Ireland wants to be a tax haven. Yeah, I get that. But Austria is not in NATO? Makes sense, because most of Austria belongs to Russia anyway, as we saw with Strache. All these Austrian politicians, they act like they're so pro-Austrian, so patriotic, but they sell their country to Russia all the time. And the idiot voters in Austria still vote for them.
Of the annual defense budget of 50 billion euros. Chancellor Olaf Scholz presented the plan in February in response to the war in Ukraine. Now, 3 months later, the government and the main opposition party have come together to amend the constitution and draft a program on how to raise and spend the money. German lawmakers say it will go to...
Austria has the Neutralvertrag from 1955, which doesn't allow them to join NATO. Isn't it time to get them in, man? Like, get over that old history and just work together?
Towards major equipment purchases to strengthen the country's combat readiness.
Man. They are the main
Germany
problem, these
is getting new fighter jets, aerial drones, armored vehicles, submarines, tanks, etc.
Good video.
But is it enough to make up for years of inadequate spending?
It's a beginning.
Well, that may not even matter. Some ambitions are so admirable, it's glorious even to fail.
It's not enough, but it's a beginning, man. What the fuck you want us to do? You want us to invade Poland, man? So you happy?
Mediocrity has been nothing short of dramatic. While in the early 1990s it had a personnel strength of 500,000, one of the largest in Europe, it has since become a shadow of its former self. Manpower fell by...
And I gotta say, I agreed with this. I felt like the army is not the future. You could use that money otherwise, but I was wrong there. I was very wrong. I didn't think that we would still live in a world of war, where World War III is on a doorstep, man, and we will all have to probably get drafted soon.
60% between 1990 and 2019, a steeper decline than in other nations. In the same period, defense spending, adjusted for inflation, fell by 34%. Meanwhile,
so low
military
the NATO
equipment
target, man. That's where Donald Trump was always right. Donald Trump had some positives about him, and calling out the NATO for not spending 2% as said on the contract made a lot of sense.
Either placed in storage, sold abroad, or dismantled for scrap. In 30 years' time, the number of German battle tanks fell from about 6,700 to 245.
That kind of behavior enabled autocrats like Vladimir Putin to do what he does, right?
The number of combat aircraft and helicopters fell from an estimated 1,300 to 345. And yet, in spite of the declining numbers, Germany's international responsibilities have grown considerably with deployments to the Balkans and Afghanistan. Years of austerity has left the Bundeswehr strapped for equipment and cash. So much so that within NATO, Germany is nowadays known as a free rider, a country that doesn't pull its weight. The turning point occurred when Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht revealed that the country had not a single combat-ready division.
Isn't that a disgrace, man? We will have planned divisions of the army combat-ready in 2025. 4 years, Alter. 2 years ahead of time. Germans. While Germany does not have a single combat-ready army division at the moment, it has 12 such divisions in the 1980s during the Cold War. I mean, now we know better, right? 10 years ago, no one would have cared about this. But now with war back on the doorstep...
A unit of some 10,000 to 15,000 troops to defend German territory. Only 150 of the army's 350 Puma infantry fighting vehicles are actually...
That's my old division. 34th Panzer Corps. Black Beret and the Panzer Medal.
Actually,
dude, we had like 10 tanks in my barracks that worked.
Operational.
Like if there was a war, we had like 10 tanks.
9 of its 51 Tiger attack helicopters can fly.
And all the tanks were in one barracks, and the barracks were so open, dude, one rocket, man, done. If I was the Chancellor of Germany, first thing I will do is every single barracks in Germany gets an anti-rocket system. Number 2, Google Maps has to completely delete any military information. All the barracks gone. Shut up! You didn't see that, huh? I threw a pen at you, and you were panicking, and I already killed you, man.
Some German units use analog radio systems that are not encrypted, while others are short on ammunition and combat-ready equipment. decades of neglect will do that to an army. Scholz's 100 billion euros upgrade looks to make things right. It is the biggest increase in Germany's defense spending since the 1990s, and lawmakers in Berlin have promised to use the special fund to transform the Bundeswehr into a powerful, cutting-edge force. But 100 billion euros is a lot of money, even for a wealthy...
Which is sad, right? I'm all about progress, man, and military, it sucks. Militaries suck. Right, it would be great if you could all just live together and have no militaries. Unfortunately, you have to do it, man.
Nation as Germany. So how exactly will the money be spent?
Right?
What are Germany's defense priorities? Well, as of yet, there is no official spending plan for the special fund.
Yeah, that's German politicians. We're gonna do something. So what are you gonna do? I said we're gonna do it, not when, okay?
With that in mind, the bulk of the special fund, 41 billion euros to be precise, will go to the Air Force. Officials in Berlin have long wanted to replace their aging fleets of helicopters and jet fighters. Some of the hardware, it's heavy lift helicopters.
I know it always sounds like I'm lying. When the Ukraine war started, I said this, but I wanted to join the reserves, but then the baby came, and at the moment I just don't have time for anything, man. I don't know if I'm lying to myself, man, but if I ever had time again, like in some years, I will totally like to join reserve training once in a while.
I wouldn't mind too much. Have been in use for over 50 years and are prone to breakdowns.
You will see.
Now, the German Air Force wants to acquire 35 Lockheed Martin F-35 jet fighters, 60 Boeing Chinook CH-47 helicopters, and 15 Eurofighter Typhoon jets. These acquisitions will likely take shape with the latest improved versions in mind. German officials also want to spend 19 billion euros on the Navy. There are plans to procure Type 212 submarines and new corvettes.
The cool thing about NATO must be that they just rule the Navy, right? When you have NATO come together with USA and Europe, man, the Navy is just unbeatable, right? My God, how is Russia and China ever going to keep up with that Navy power, right?
And frigates.
That's pretty fucking OP.
Warships
Green
can
Navy
get
everywhere,
really
man.
expensive,
Green Navy
especially
everywhere.
with German defense contractors. The allotted budget sounds...
Naval and air? Dude, they can't even take Ukraine. What the fuck are they going to naval bomb, bro?
If all goes to plan, German officials hope to expand the number of military personnel to 200 and 300,000, which is 20,000 more than there are today. By and large, these are the items and requirements.
13,000 cyber people? What are they doing? They don't, trust me, they just fucking play Gothic 2 all day.
Scholz's defense plan is just an initial down payment. According to an economics research.
It's sometimes sad that when I talk to family members or people in real life, for example, I have a grandpa. My grandpa, he's a hermit, he lives totally alone, he talks to nobody. And I was visiting him the other day and he was like, this can't be! Why do we have to go to war now for the Ukrainians? Ah, fuck that. I feel like these people are really lacking a bunch of looking long-term, looking what really is happening, man. Well, like, dude, there's a legit threat. There's threats on this planet and we have to protect ourselves. And even if we're a military, it's just there as a symbol, like, hey, if you come for us, we have something against that.
Research organization in Munich, Germany must commit another 25 billion euros a year to meet its NATO quota on the long-term basis. And this is where things get interesting. Aside from the one-time 100 billion euros special fund, Scholz also promised that defense spending would amount to more than 2% of the GDP,
that is so much money,
however, pacifist sentiment is widespread in Germany. Many are skeptical of the army's capacity and responsibility due to its past atrocities. Scholz's plan is therefore dependent on public approval and political negotiation. Even so, money alone will not fix everything. Besides political will, Germany has a dysfunctional procurement system, one that is agonizingly slow. Ordering replacement equipment takes years, including for ships, tanks, but also for modest items like body armor, radios, and uniforms. It took the Germans just to deliver new battle helmets for its ground forces. For instance, an order of 120,000 assault rifles manufactured by Heckler & Koch has been mirrored in a legal battle and still has not gone through. That deal is 7 years behind
That is
schedule
ridiculous,
and still has
man.
no end in
That's
sight.
like almost like a Russian spies involved there. Like, what the fuck? It's probably
Still
just
more,
retardation.
the German military budget is renegotiated every fiscal year. Money that has not been spent by the end of the year is essentially withdrawn. So, when a legal dispute stalls for years, the allotted money is essentially lost. As a result, legal disputes result in delays, but also in underfinancing. With the way the bureaucracy is set up, it is easier for Germans to supply weaponry to a client on the other side of the world than it is to supply the Bundeswehr. So while Berlin's wish list includes new ships, new helicopters, and more tanks, additional political, judicial, and bureaucratic reform is necessary to speed up the procurement system. And even then, political will needs to be maintained to hold on to that 2% defense spending threshold. The 100 billion euros military upgrade is an excellent first step, but it is a first step nonetheless. National defense is the first duty of the state, but to have proper defense requires commitment in all areas. Germany may not be interested in conflict, but conflict may be interested in Germany.
Yeah, I like this guy. Okay, we have one more and then we do some Bannerlore. How Russia could collapse.
This is a photo of Anatoly Chubaish cashing out at some ATM abroad. Who is Chubaish, you may ask? Well, he is the one who led the privatization of Russia in the early 1990s, creating shady loopholes that brought about the Russian oligarchy. Chubaish then helped Putin into office and...
Dude, I don't know much about this, but this entire oligarch, Russian businessman, politics, Putin, that's like so mafia and everything is connected and everything is... If you're against them, they fucking poison you and shit. It's so... Oh, dude, man. It's crazy.
Later promoted Russia's passportization policy, a tool for extraterritorial governance, military intervention, and foreign policy. In other words, Chubaish is one of the socio-political architects of the Russian Federation. Aside from Putin, no other person bears so much responsibility for the Kremlin's jingoism and ethno-nationalism.
These are fucking heroes, man. These people have the balls to demonstrate for Ukraine in Russia, man. The fucking balls. How many people in chat, including me, will have the balls to do this, bro?
No one understands Russia and its subtle inner workings better than Chubaish.
That is some real heroes, dude.
He is also the highest-ranking official to have defected from Putin's government and abandoned his country.
Agents?
So, what is the architect of the Russian state running away from? Presumably, the end of Russia itself. Chubaish is running while he still can. So let's talk about that, because this is one revolution that will not be televised. Empires and nations come and go. Russia is no exception. It collapsed twice before in the 20th century. Interestingly, not by guns and steel from without, but by friction and corruption from within. That's what Russia needs again.
It needs to come from the inside, man.
Another collapse is greatly exaggerated. The war in Ukraine has stripped bare Russia's internal mechanisms. No less than 3 distinct disastrous waves are coalescing that risk overpowering the machinery of the state. The first wave is the threat posed by a unified Western bloc. Throughout history, Russia's longest and bloodiest conflicts were fought against European powers ranging from the Black Sea to the Baltic Sea. For the longest time, the European continent remained divided along geopolitical lines. Russia was part of one coalition or the other. But the war in Ukraine has pushed everyone over the edge. The Western Bloc is almost unanimously united against Russia. The combined economic, military, and diplomatic resources of the Western Bloc outweigh those of Russia many times over. Even if Russia gains territories in Ukraine, its security needs along the European front will remain exposed. Poland is on a military shopping spree, Germany has pledged to increase defense spending, Finland and Sweden have made up their minds to join.
In the long run, right, what a short-term thinking of Putin, man. Let's take Ukraine. But in the long run, you have
NATO
united the West,
and
man.
the United States now considers Ukraine a top priority in foreign policy. talk about blowback. As military cooperation in Eastern Europe deepens in the coming years, Russia will come to rely on its nuclear arsenal as its primary deterrence. The second wave stems from the economic war of attrition. With the sanctions in place, Russia is cut from the Western-based global financial system, including technology transfers and industrial goods. Access to capital has diminished, and Moscow is likely to lose its share in the European energy market. Exporting crude oil and natural gas to India and China is possible, but the volume and revenue will not be the same. With the economic war of attrition in effect, industrial and scientific advances in Russia will slowly freeze. This will have profound consequences. The third wave is a crisis in statehood. Russia's socio-political landscape is not stable. It hasn't been stable since the 1990s. State institutions are riddled with corruption. The rule of law only applies to those who cannot afford to bribe their way out, and the imbalance of its political elite is enormous. All of this is hardly unique to the Russian state. In Russia, however, those previous breakdowns, the 1917 revolution and the 1991 collapse, are deeply ingrained in the Russian mindset. As a remedy, the Russian public has embraced stability as its most important pillar for political decision-making. It goes without saying that these three waves are connected in non-linear ways. They form a perfect storm of social unrest, foreign intervention, and economic collapse. The last time Russia faced such a basket of disasters was in the 1920s, when its statehood imploded from within. Russian history seems to be in a loop. The current situation could still go either way, but the aforementioned three waves stretch Russia's resources and institutions. So much so that Western policymakers are increasingly betting on the downfall of the Russian Federation. Now, when most people think of a hypothetical Russian revolution, they think of a collision between Putin and the public. The leading narrative is either a rebellion against Putin or a palace coup. Those scenarios may seem plausible until they're not. Regardless of how bad things get, Russians are unlikely to abandon Putin. According to Russian sociological research organization Levada Center, approval for Putin sits at 83%, which is an increase of more than 10%.
I really do believe that Putin did a great job of brainwashing the Russian public a lot, and a lot of Russians are pro-Putin, because 20 years they have been put that in the head, man, and that sucks a bit. And getting that out of the Russian people is gonna be so hard, man. Almost impossible.
Compared to the stats in January, public grievances have to be expressed in one way or another. Instead of a palace coup or a revolution, we could see civil disobedience directed not against the central government, but against the local authorities. The thing is, Russia is not homogeneous. While the political elite in Moscow can ignore social unrest, the regional governors cannot. So, what is happening here and now is that Russia's regional authorities are stocking up on food supplies as much as possible.
That's a nice part.
When resources become harder to come by, federal regions could start falling out of sync. They won't declare independence, but they will start acting in the best interests of their respective regions, even if that comes at the expense of other federal regions. Think of regional checkpoints, de facto embargoes, etc. De facto economic separatism could take shape. It would be a subtle change. No one would be shouting it from the rooftops. Case in point, self-preservation could steadily turn into tribal politics.
Well, it's fucking Russia,
By acting in the best interests of their respective regions, the regional authorities could end up breaking the norms. The Tatarstan Republic, for instance, could set up internal customs on its borders with neighboring federal subjects. At the same time, the Dagestan Republic could stop complying with Moscow's legislated sanctions and start importing and exporting according to its own needs. Frictions like these would be the first signs of internal decay, and the West would support this phase rather than prevent it. Eventually, economic separatism would turn into political separatism as the momentum builds. German, Polish, Ukrainian, Turkish, Chinese and Japanese officials could then start talking to the regional authorities. As more nations start negotiating with the regional leaders, new allies, markets and resources will become available, which would spur even more decentralization of Russian power. All this remains unlikely, but not impossible. Still some, especially in the Caucasus, would fall into conflict with each other, while others like Kaliningrad, Karelia, Vladivostok and the Kuril Islands would look to join the nations to which they belonged before World War II. Some regions would become wealthy and others would see a decline in living standards. A collapsing Russia would be the greatest geopolitical project of the century. The ultimate danger stems from Russia's nuclear arsenal. Should the Russian chain of command collapse and the Russian territorial integrity break apart, it would be nearly impossible to secure all of Russia's nuclear sites. Non-state actors, rogue factions and regional warlords would seek to obtain nuclear components. Even a single unaccounted nuclear weapon would be a catastrophe. An international task force would likely be set up in the aftermath of a collapsing Russia, but the nuclear question would present an extraordinary threat. Once more, the collapse of Russia remains unlikely, but if it does happen, it wouldn't go down the way Yugoslavia did. There wouldn't be a single revolution in the capital.
Very hypothetical.
Rather, Russia's collapse.
I like this guy. Cool videos, but that's so fucking hypothetical. I want to keep, dude. We're gonna do this old stream. Fuck it. What happens if Finland joins NATO?
Finland is getting ready to join NATO, and that is a problem for Russia. The western portion of the Kola Peninsula is packed with nuclear weapons and military facilities. The bulk of Russia's strategic bombers are kept here, parked neatly in air bases along this stretch of land. Yet all that firepower, deterrence and power projection is held in place by a single parallel road and rail corridor, which runs for about 700 kilometers before it forks. The corridor running through the Kola Peninsula would transform into a strategic choke point. A NATO-backed surprise attack on Russia could derail the supply chains between Moscow and Murmansk.
You're on the watch list now.
Like in Ukraine, a company of specialists could sabotage the infrastructure and cripple Russia's nuclear capabilities. There is no defense against this vulnerability. The geography doesn't allow it.
Guys, educate me. So Finland has signed that they want to join NATO. Sweden, I don't know. So how does that process work? All of NATO has to approve them now. And the problem was Erdogan in Turkey, who now said yes. I saw that in radio.
The Finnish-Russian relationship is a product of history. In 1809, the polity, now known as Finland, was carved out of conquered Swedish territory by the Russian Empire. Tsarist rule subjected the territory to repression and forced assimilation. And it wasn't until the Russian Revolution of 1917 that Finland broke off to become fully independent. The Finno-Soviet Treaty of 1948 ensured a militarily neutral Finland, giving Stalin the buffer he wanted. While for Helsinki, the deal preserved its democracy and kept it out of the Warsaw Pact. By sitting on the diplomatic fence, Finland maintained good relations with the West and economic cooperation with the East in what became known as Finlandization. This policy persisted even after the Soviet collapse in 1991. In the wake of the Russo-Georgian War of 2008, Finland's prime minister even stated that the lesson of the conflict was that Helsinki should seek closer ties with Moscow. Nevertheless, cooperation between Finland and NATO deepened. For years, all Finnish military procurements have met NATO standards, ensuring the interoperability of forces. The critical difference is that Finland is not shielded by Article 5, meaning there is no obligation for NATO members to come to Finland's aid should it be attacked. Helsinki understands that this provision is a third-rail issue for Moscow, and for this reason, Finns have historically opposed NATO membership as being provocative and unnecessary. Finland's parliament is currently debating the issue, and an application for NATO membership is now expected in mid-May. Within a few weeks, decades of Finnish neutrality unraveled. Should Helsinki apply for NATO membership, a rapid ascension is likely. The ratification period would be dangerous as Finland
used to be like
would
15 to
not yet
20%.
be under Article 5. Washington has therefore offered support to Helsinki during the transition period. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has supported the move, while NATO's former
Ey, das ist kein Pflaume, Alter! Digga, das ist kein Pflaume!
Secretary General has said that Finland's membership could be approved overnight at the alliance's headquarters. That said, not everyone is thrilled to welcome Sweden and Finland into NATO. Croatia, Hungary, and Greece are some of the nations that could veto NATO expansion.
Not gonna do it. Croatia
However, the biggest obstacle comes from Turkey, NATO's southern front.
Erdogan knows he has leverage, he knows he can demand some stuff.
Finland and Sweden are major sponsors of the YPG and the PYD, whose
Sweden boosts Syria funding.
Parent organization is the infamous PKK.
Turkey has big power here,
Hundreds of millions of dollars of Finnish and Swedish taxpayer money is directly and indirectly sent to groups that seek to harm Turkey's population.
And that's just real life, that's politics, man. You know, you always have these idiots with 10 IQ that are like, but what about the PKK? What about it? Politics and real life is about compromise. Would you rather have Sweden and Finland join so Russia gets a bit shit on? Or would you rather not let them join because of Syrian and PKK issues? It sucks, but that's real life. That's real life. In politics and life, you look at what is the fucking... That's what democracy is, right? You look at what is the worst option, blah, blah, blah. What the fuck can you do, bro? Like all these young Antifa guys going out in the street, no, the PKK, no. What do you want to do? What the fuck?
This
you gotta look
self-defeating relationship is the work of special lobbying groups within Finland and Sweden. Without much hassle, they could drop the PKK relationship and reassure Turkey. So some last-minute horse trading is necessary to reach a consensus within NATO. In any event, most are expecting Finland to be offered NATO membership before the alliance's Madrid conference in June. Excitement for Finnish membership is not solely due to its proximity to Russia. Finland packs a heavy punch, and unlike some NATO members, it would be a contributor to the alliance, not just a user. The country's intelligence capabilities are substantial, and its armed forces are bolstered by mandatory national service.
Finland has a real
Helsinki
army,
can raise
Germany,
280,000 troops and 900,000 reserves out of a population of 5.6 million. Finland also has more battle tanks than Germany and an air force of 64 F-18s armed with US-supplied smart missiles, and with an additional 64 new F-35 jets to be delivered beginning in 2026.
Protecting against Russia and
Furthermore, the country has a strong navy, and its participation in other NATO operations means that it is fully interoperable with the alliance.
Dude, there's probably a guy living in Alabama who has more tanks than Germany. It's not that hard.
Like Finland, Sweden was rattled by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to recent polls, a majority of Swedes support NATO membership, and as such, Stockholm is also looking at joining NATO. Such an addition would change the strategic landscape considerably. Sweden's Gripen fighters, when added to the F-35s of Norway, Denmark and Finland, would amount to a force totaling more than 250 advanced fighter jets, forcing the Russians to adjust their strategic posturing and stretch their military deterrence thinly.
That's like
Moreover,
joining the
Swedish airspace and the possibility of a military base on Gotland would have tremendous power projection capabilities. It would
imagine you're Russian stationed here during World War III, man. You are not gonna...
Converting the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake would also reduce the vulnerabilities associated with the Suwalki Gap and create greater EU-NATO integration and burden sharing, allowing Washington to finally turn its attention to the security competition in Asia-Pacific. Should the Baltic Sea turn into a NATO lake, it would incapacitate the Russian Navy with no relief in sight.
It's always so sad that this is the case, right? If Russia, if they could just have a revolution and have fucked up, corrupt democracies like we have them, and we could all just work together and come together and trade and have exchange and stuff.
Moscow's nuclear facilities on the Kola Peninsula are the crux of Russian power and missile defense in the Western Arctic. The closed town of Severomorsk on the Barents Sea forms the headquarters of Russia's northern fleet. Moscow has spent the past decade modernizing the base, and as climate change opens new shipping lanes in the Arctic, the Severomorsk facility will only become more integral to Russian power projection. The nearby Plesets Cosmodrome is also home to missile systems such as RS-24 ICBMs, which are capable of delivering nuclear payloads across a range of 10,000 kilometers.
This is insane, dude.
Going by nuclear weapons, the
biggest player in World War III is gonna be Google, man. I'm telling you, Google is gonna shit on everyone, man.
However, the mere act of Finland joining NATO would more than double Russia's border with the alliance, imposing a heavy financial burden on Moscow at a time when its economy is hurting under sanctions. The Kremlin could retaliate through hybrid warfare and cyber attacks. It could also
what is Russian cyber attacks? It's a fucking troll on Facebook making boomer dads believe that Russia is right.
Finland joining NATO would fundamentally change the geopolitical calculus in the Baltics. It would open a new front in the ongoing clash between Russia and the West, a clash that would intensify should Sweden follow Finland into NATO. The forces of politics are intractable. They often lead small nations into dangerous, unknown territory.
Everybody knows the Finnish air logo,
clearly favors the West. Whether Russia will accept this fact peacefully is not so obvious. As in the past, Finland is caught in a situation not of its own making, and in times of war, standing aside is also considered a choice. Helsinki may prefer to keep its hands clean, but no one can stay neutral.
You can't stay clean anymore, that's the problem. Yeah, I like this guy. This guy makes so much sense. This guy is amazing. I like this guy. Bro, you made it till the end of the video. Congratulations! So why not click this video now? You're already here anyway. Just do it.